Welcome back to the channel, my friends. Tonight we'll be venturing deep into the heart of darkness, exploring those places where fear takes root and nightmares come to life. So gather round, turn off the lights, and let the shadows envelop you as we delve into tonight's tales. We've got 3 bone-chilling stories for you, each one more terrifying than the last. These are the kinds of stories that stay with you long after you've heard them, the ones that make you think twice about ever venturing into the darkness alone. So if you're brave enough to join me, hit that subscribe button, turn off the lights, and prepare to be thoroughly spooked. Let's begin. The forest held its breath, air thick with the smell of pine and damp earth. A young couple, Emily and James, were making their way along the winding dirt road, eager to escape the city and spend a romantic weekend in a secluded cabin. The cabin, nestled deep within the woods, had been in Emily's family for generations, a place of childhood memories and summer laughter. But this weekend, the laughter would be replaced with something far more sinister.
As dusk began to settle, casting long, eerie shadows through the trees, we arrived at the cabin. It stood at the end of a long, overgrown driveway, its wooden walls weathered and grey. A sense of unease settled over me as we stepped out of the car, a shiver running down my spine despite the mild summer air.
The silence of the woods was almost suffocating, broken only by the distant caw of a crow. Inside, the cabin was dimly lit, filled with the musty scent of old wood and forgotten memories. They built a fire in the stone fireplace, the crackling flames casting dancing shadows on the walls, and for a while, the warmth of the fire and the promise of a weekend alone together pushed away the unsettling feeling that had crept in with the twilight.
But as the night deepened and the fire began to die down to glowing embers, the silence of the woods became oppressive. It was then that we first heard it, a faint whispering, coming from just beyond the circle of light cast by the windows. At first, we dismissed it as the wind rustling through the leaves, but as the whispers grew louder, more insistent, a knot of fear began to tighten in Emily's chest.
James, trying to appear brave, told me it was just animals, but even he couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching us from the darkness. That night, nestled in the old bed, the whispers seemed to press in on us from all sides. Sleep was impossible. Every creak of the floorboards, every sigh of the wind against the windows, sent our hearts racing.
The next day, they tried to shrug off the events of the previous night. They went for a walk, trying to enjoy the beauty of the woods, but the feeling of being watched never left them. The whispers seemed to follow them, just out of sight, hidden among the trees. As the sun began to set, casting long, ominous shadows through the trees, they knew they couldn't spend another night in the cabin.
We were packing up the car, our movements hurried and frantic, when we heard it again. The whispering, closer this time, filled with a malice that sent chills down our spines. A figure emerged from the trees, shrouded in shadow, its features obscured by the darkness.
I gasped, my hand flying to my mouth to stifle a scream. The figure took a step closer, and another, the whispering growing louder, more insistent. Then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, the figure melted back into the trees, swallowed by the shadows.
Emily and James didn't hesitate. They jumped into the car, the engine roaring to life, and sped away down the dirt road, the whispering woods echoing behind them. They never returned to the cabin, the memory of that weekend forever tainted by the unseen terror that lurked in the shadows. The whispering woods held their secret close, a chilling reminder that some places are best left undisturbed. The old cabin, nestled on the shores of a secluded lake, promised a weekend of fun and relaxation for a group of friends. The laughter of 5 friends filled the air as they unloaded the car, their voices echoing across the still surface of the water. The setting sun painted the sky in hues of orange and purple, casting long, dancing shadows across the clearing. For a brief moment, all was right with the world. But the serenity of the scene was a facade, a thin veil concealing the darkness that lurked beneath the surface.
The first night, we gathered around a bonfire, sharing stories and laughter, the flames reflecting in our eyes. But as the night wore on, and the fire began to die down, a sense of unease settled over the group. It started subtly, a feeling of being watched from the darkness beyond the circle of firelight. We would catch glimpses of movement in the woods, shadows shifting just out of sight. Then came the noises, soft at first, almost indistinguishable from the sounds of the night, but gradually increasing in volume and intensity.
There were footsteps on the porch, slow and deliberate, followed by the distinct sound of someone trying the doorknob. One of the friends, a young woman named Sarah, swore she saw a face peering through the window, its features contorted in a grotesque grin. But when they rushed to the window, there was nothing there. The friends tried to rationalize the strange occurrences, blaming their imaginations, the creaky old cabin, anything but the truth that was slowly dawning on them. They were not alone.
Something else was in the cabin with us, something unseen, something malevolent. As the weekend progressed, the strange occurrences escalated. Objects would move on their own, lights would flicker and die, and the temperature in the cabin would drop suddenly, sending chills down our spines. The unseen entity seemed to be toying with us, its presence growing stronger, more menacing with each passing hour.
One evening, as they were preparing dinner, a heavy cast iron pan flew across the room, seemingly of its own accord, crashing to the floor with a deafening clang. Sarah screamed, her nerves, already frayed, finally snapping. She couldn't take it anymore. She wanted to leave, to get as far away from the cursed cabin as possible. But the others, their curiosity outweighing their fear, convinced her to stay.
They decided to try to communicate with the entity, to reason with it, to understand why it was tormenting us. We gathered in the living room, our faces pale and drawn in the flickering light of the fireplace. We held hands, our fear palpable in the silence of the cabin. "If there's anyone here with us," one of the friends began, his voice trembling, "please make yourself known. We mean you no harm."
The silence that followed was deafening. Just when they were about to give up hope, the room grew deathly cold. The air crackled with an unseen energy, and the smell of damp earth and decay filled their nostrils. Then they heard it, a voice, low and guttural, seeming to emanate from the very walls of the cabin.
Get out!
The voice was filled with a rage and hatred so pure, so primal, that it sent a wave of terror washing over the friends. They scrambled to their feet, their eyes wide with terror, their hearts pounding in their chests. They didn't need to be told twice. They gathered their things in a frenzy, throwing clothes and belongings into their bags, not caring what they left behind. They piled into the car, the engine sputtering to life, and sped away down the dirt road, the headlights cutting through the darkness like knives. As they drove, they could feel the entity's gaze burning into their backs, its rage following them long after they had left the cabin behind. They never returned to the lake house. The memory of that weekend forever seared into their minds. The old dirt road, barely more than a pair of ruts carved into the mountainside, was treacherous, even in the daylight. For Alex, a solitary traveler seeking respite from city life, the isolation was a welcome reprieve. He had rented a remote cabin miles from civilization, nestled in a valley shrouded in ancient forests.
As I pulled up to the cabin, the last rays of sunlight were fading behind the mountains, casting long, eerie shadows across the clearing. I stepped out of my car, stretching my stiff limbs after the long drive, and took a deep breath of the crisp mountain air. The silence was absolute, broken only by the gentle rustling of leaves in the wind.
The cabin, though quaint from a distance, was unsettling up close. The windows, which had appeared dark and empty from afar, seemed to watch him now, like vacant eyes peering out from the shadows. The front door creaked open on rusty hinges, revealing a dark and dusty interior.
I lit a kerosene lamp, the flickering flame casting dancing shadows across the rough-hewn walls. The cabin consisted of a single room, sparsely furnished with a rickety table, 2 chairs, and a cot in the corner.
He built a fire in the stove, the crackling flames doing little to dispel the oppressive darkness that seemed to press in from all sides. As night fell, the shadows outside the cabin deepened, stretching and contorting into grotesque shapes in the flickering firelight. Alex sat by the stove, trying to ignore the feeling of being watched, the prickling sensation of eyes on the back of his neck.
I lay down on the cot, fully clothed, but sleep proved elusive. The shadows seemed to writhe and twist in the corners of the room, taking on the forms of menacing figures.
Then he saw them. At first, they were just fleeting glimpses in the periphery of his vision. Dark shapes flitting across the walls, gone as soon as he turned his head to face them. But as the night wore on, they grew bolder, more substantial. They were tall and gaunt, their forms shifting and indistinct like shadows given life. They moved with an unnerving fluidity, gliding across the room, their eyes, two glowing embers in the darkness, fixed on him with an intensity that made his blood run cold.
I lay frozen in terror, unable to move, unable to scream. The shadows surrounded my cot, their whispers growing louder, more insistent. I felt a cold, clammy hand close around my wrist, its grip like a vice. I tried to pull away, but the grip tightened, dragging me towards the edge of the cot.
Just when he thought he would be dragged into the darkness, consumed by the shadows, the first rays of dawn pierced through the cracks in the cabin walls. The shadows recoiled as if burned, their forms dissolving into wisps of smoke. The grip on his wrist loosened, and then it was gone. Alex lay panting on the cot, bathed in the cold light of dawn, his body trembling, his mind reeling from the horrors he had witnessed.
I scrambled to my feet, gathered my belongings, and stumbled out of the cabin into the blinding sunlight. I didn't look back as I fled down the mountain. The memory of the cabin of shadows seared into my mind, a chilling reminder of the darkness that lurks just beyond the fringes of our perception.
Thank you for braving the darkness with us tonight. We hope these tales of terror have chilled you to the bone. If you enjoyed tonight's journey into the unknown, be sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more spine-chilling stories. And if you have any terrifying tales of your own that you'd like to share, be sure to leave them in the comments below. We're always on the lookout for new stories to fuel your nightmares. Until next time, sleep tight and remember, sometimes the most terrifying monsters are the ones we can't see.